What's up, everybody? I'm Media Master Jacob, established 2004, and I'm proud to bring you a new series on this channel. I will be reviewing all my DVD and VHS collection, and I will also be covering the Thomas DVDs another time in another series outside of this one. So, to begin this new series, I'm going to be discussing the first DVD that I've ever gotten. And that DVD we're going to begin with Team Up for Adventure. So, let's cut the chatter and get right on to the history of this release. Team Up for Adventure was first released onto DVD on April 25th, 2006 by Walt Disney Home Entertainment. Here's a little fun fact. When I first got this, it was at a Tanger Outlets outside of Vaughan, Ontario on February 13th, 2016, and I was only intending to buy the Little Einsteins DVDs until it blossomed into my big collection. It's a unique one to start off with, I dare say. Also to mention, in 2006, the DVD was also advertised on select boxes of General Mills Kick cereal. There aren't really many promotional images of Team Up for Adventure, and this is the only way to see them. So I'm gonna guess that these are completely rare and hard to come by if you're hunting for the boxes. Also to mention, in 2013, there was an international copy with the English dialogue. There are several other international copies, but this is the best one that I can find. And let's not forget that you can also find the original copy of Team Up for Adventure in a 3 DVD pack with Our Huge Adventure and Mission Celebration. Alright, so that pretty much covers the history of this release, so now let's go on to our episodes. So Team Up for Adventure contains 3 episodes, all from season 1, How We Became the Little Einsteins, The True Story, I Love to Conduct, and Rocket Safari. Just a quick note before we begin. How I'm going to rate these TV shows on DVDs is going to be simple. I will discuss the plot of each episode, discuss my opinions on each episode, and rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And as for the movies on DVD, I will be skipping the plot of them and I'll go over the other stuff. Because if I covered the plots of all of the movies, and knowing that I would do that in one video in the future, we'd be here for hours. So, let's begin with our first episode on this release. How We Became the Little Einsteins, The True Story. Rocket flies out of Leo's mobile at a certain time, and he's become a big rocket ship that the team can't keep in the house. So they go off to search for Rocket's own place, but they don't have any luck, only realizing that their yard could be where Rocket lives. For the first episode of the entire show, I think it's a pretty solid one. Ridiculous as all hell for a story concept, but it's an amazing one. This is ironically the first episode of the series not counting Our Huge Adventure. The reason why is because Our Huge Adventure is basically the last 2 episodes of season 1 meshed together. And that, I won't really count that. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the beginning of the entire show as a whole, which is pretty nice, I will admit it. And I will admit, Rocket is a pretty good character in general for the show as a whole. And design-wise, he's cool looking, and as a character, he's great, plain and simple. However, one thing I must point out is that we don't really have a lot of information on the four members as a whole. It is good. They have a fine introduction in this episode, but I really wish we got a episode where we saw them form together as friends. That's just messed up. But overall, while there is a few nitpicks in this episode, I think it's a good way to start the series off as well as the DVD. I rank this episode a 10 out of 10. Now we move on to our second episode, I Love to Conduct. A bald eagle steals Leo's baton and takes it to its nest in the ocean. The team go after it to get Leo's baton back, and they end up and in the end, Leo goes off on his own to get his baton back. For the second episode on the release, I think it's pretty good. The word I would describe to use it is the word that Yami Tay, or Tay, used to describe Thomas Goes Fishing. Kooky. However, this episode is pretty much nowhere near as kooky as that. It's a pretty weird concept, but I think it knows it's weird, where it tries to have fun with it somewhat. For one, I don't really know how the team didn't notice the bald eagle or try to stop it, for that matter. To quote Tay, "Are your f***ing legs broken? And are your f***ing ears broken? And are your f***ing eyes broken?" Also to mention, the scenery and the music in this episode is pretty good, and that's not the most flattering compliment. And I like how it's paired in this episode, despite I have a light guilty pleasure with this. But if there's one thing I have to question, it's obviously the whale scene toward when they tried to get to the eagle's nest. And also, as a character, Leo doesn't really interest me. And I don't know why we need this episode in existence, even though it's not pointless at all. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's kind of questionable for me. I'm not going to dry this episode out as much as possible, because there's not much I need to complain about this. As I said, I have a light guilty pleasure with this, and I'm ranking it a 9 out of 10. And now we have our final episode, Rocket Safari. On a visit to Africa, Rocket gets stuck in a waterfall, and the team needs to go find animals to get him unstuck. They go on the search for them and find a lot of strong animals. Meanwhile, a bee wants to help them, but due to his size and his strength, it doesn't work out. Oh boy, where do I start with this mess? I'm not really I do have a more guilty pleasure with this than the last one we've had. This episode is basically not a favorite of mine, and that's not because it's a Rocket episode. There are other reasons. For one, I feel like the episode knows it's weird to where it tries to make do with the plot of it somewhat. The episode is just filled with a big plot hole on Rocket being stuck. And how is he not strong enough? I will admit, however, the animals featured in this episode are pretty good, and that's not the most flattering compliment. But as a whole, the plot of this episode just steers from one character finding an animal to another finding an animal, shorting it down to 2, and getting Rocket unstuck and calling it a day. And I'm not really the biggest fan of the music in this episode either. I'm not going to spend the rest of this video drying this episode out like a sponge, So I'm just gonna come clean and say, while this isn't the best way to close out the DVD, it's solid enough, but it's not something I totally go crazy over. And I have a heavier guilty pleasure with this episode than I love to conduct. And because of that, I'm ranking it a strong 8 out of 10. And other than what I said, I couldn't care less about this episode as a whole. And that will pretty much wrap up the episodes on this release. So what are my thoughts on Team Up for Adventure? Well, I've discussed this in this DVD down to the smallest atom. But does it pass the nostalgia test that it did that it had back in 2016? I would say it does. The episode selection on here is pretty good, and remember how I said I collected the Little Einsteins DVDs to start my collection off? Yeah, the reason why is because Disney Plus wasn't around back then, and I knew I wasn't going to collect the DVDs of the show one day. However, over time I've expanded to that, and my collection has grown into something far more worthwhile. But overall, this DVD contains a mix of good episodes to overly decent ones with a guilty pleasure. And I think it's a good DVD to start it off since I got the other 10 afterwards. So, this is one DVD that you definitely should start off with if you're a fan of the show. And that does it for this review. I'd like to say thank you to all you viewers for watching, and I will create a playlist featuring my reviews that will be put in the description in the future. So what is the next DVD going to be? Well, with Christmas on the horizon, it's time to cover some Christmas releases. And I'm gonna start the next few releases off with one of my favorites, the 12 episodes of Santa Toopy. See you guys next time.